tactics and all of the above. What's going on, Henry? What's going on, Karma? NASA, Juan. How are you doing, sir? Bro, it's been a long time, eh? I hope you guys can all hear me. Let me just check, do a quick sound check. New background settings all going on. It's techie this week, isn't it? I'm gonna have to get straight into it. And I don't know, I need to treat this very carefully. I know I'm not a journalist, but I try and hold myself to that sort of accountability. Where you need to double check sources, understand the truth, not report on anything that is nonsense. I hope you guys are all well. I hope you've had a fantastic few weeks on F1 and have been getting to grips with all the chaos that's ensued over the past 5 days or so. Let's get into it, man. So here, and you guys are, I'm not even going to cite the source because it's techie. No one else is, so I'm not even going to give them a name. There is an online publication early last week that publishes an article that talks about a couple of different things that's kicked off. That was the grenade. That was the pin that got pulled on the grenade that blew up everything misogyny, intimidatory in the world of F1 in the week that was. So a publication releases an article that takes aim at the relationship that Toto Wolff has with his wife, Susie Wolff. Now, of course, anybody can get together with whoever they want to, right? Like, you can't ban marriage in F1. But the problem being that Susie Wolff is the first managing director of the F1 Academy, the female or the woman's arm of F1. And again, listen, they're doing fantastic work there. Susie Wolff is a legend. She's doing fantastic work. F1 for the longest time has been an old white European boys club. And there is change that's needed in there. F1 understand, and the world more broadly understand, that F1 needs to amend to match as far as diversity and the demographic that's watching it, and to the world at large, right? Lewis Hamilton has brought a massive, largely unrepresented fan base to F1, and so there needs to be a change there. And Susie Wolff via the F1 Academy is, of course, doing some fantastic work. What this article talks about, however, or alludes to, is that Toto Wolff, team principal of Mercedes-Benz AMG Petronas, has been at a meeting and spoken of things, of information that he probably shouldn't have access to. How did he get that information? Speculates this article. And again, we're working on the assumption that this meeting actually happened, that at this meeting Toto Wolff espoused or it was given light to the fact that he had knowledge about things that he shouldn't have. This is the speculation, and this is the cornerstone of the article. This is the truth, perceived truth, that the article operates under, and that's techie. That's so bloody techie. Who knows whether this stuff happened? And again, it speaks to journalistic integrity, because I know for a fact your usual articles, your usual trusted publications, they didn't even talk to the article per se, nor did they breathe life into these events that this publication speaking to, because they didn't want to, right? How do you know? Anybody can say, in the world of internet journalism, anybody can say that anything happened unverified, without two sources having been checked. And that's where it gets bloody techie. Cameron, of course, jumped on the shakedown and talked to this earlier on in the week, and probably gave the publication too much credence. Now, just to give you the genesis story of this publication that shall remain unnamed. But you know what, I'll talk to it. Business F1 Journal, I think it's called. Let me just make sure about that, because it's techie. I think you guys should be able to go and check it out for yourselves. But it is bloody techie. Go on, Cameron, get your line up your ducks in a row, mate. I haven't even got it, have I? Of course you haven't, Cameron. I think it's called the F1. It's either F1 Business Journal or Business F1. You can go and check it out for yourself. Again, it's not like it's not the Times. It's not the most reputable of sources. But you know what? They published the article, and we've got to talk to it, right? Because again, That was the pin pulled in the grenade that triggered everything ensuing. That was the first domino in what was misogynistic and intimidatory and legal fueled couple of days in F1. So they've talked about they haven't cited sources, and critically there's not an author on the article. And again, this is really NASA, no details of what information. Seems like speculation or conjecture. It does seem like speculation and conjecture, but you know what made me think it had, as I read through the article and combed through it, I just think that allegedly, you know what, if they speak about the two unnamed principles that they cite in this article, one of whom has a legacy of conflict with Toto Wolff. Who's that, peddlers? And again, listen, I'm indulging this article and taking it at face value for a second. Who else could they be talking about apart from one Red Bull team principal called Christian Horner now? And again, allegedly in all of this, because I don't want to get sued for nothing. But who else are they? Which other one of those team principals on the grid has a long-standing feud with Christian, with team principal of Mercedes-Benz AMG, Toto Wolff? Anyway, and that person says critically, there are other bits in fact, let me preface with this because there are other bits in there that are quite important. So it talks about, here's where I think it gets a bit techie. The article talks about potential infringement of conflicts of interest and related parties, meaning that because Toto Wolff is a team principal and he works for an F1 team, that potentially what you can't do is alter the competitive landscape by giving him, via anyone, information that the other team principals aren't privy to, right? Because that fosters, that distorts the competitive landscape and gives one team principal above all others a durable competitive advantage, and that can't be allowed to happen, as it did at Singapore last year when Toto Wolff manifested knowledge that he was privy to by way of whoever. I'm not going to debate that. Some people say it was Shayla Ann Rao, General Secretary of the FIA. He knew that there was an impending investigation on the back of cost cap infringement by Red Bull Racing. How did he know? How did he get that information? But the key thing is Toto Wolff shouldn't have access to that information. Now, we're mixing and matching and non-conflating issues, but I think it's important that we go back to the genesis, the true genesis of this story in inverted commas. In Singapore last year, conflict of interest is always very, very techie, though, ladies and gents, because F1 is deeply incestuous. It has always been. The teams always mix and match, employees always leave and then go to another F1 team, of course, with secrets and technical information. Mention no names, Spygate. This always has happened with F1. It's so advanced and nuanced a sport that there are only a few people in the world capable of doing these jobs, right? So when somebody leaves, I don't know, Aston Martin, mention name, or Red Bull even, mention their names, Dan Fallows, and then goes across the Red Bull, it's no surprise when the Aston Martin team make a car that looks a lot like Red Bull, even notwithstanding gardening leave. Dan Fallows has that information. How do you police that? FIA, regulator, governing body, you kind of can't. It's really, really hard to get around, especially stuff like intellectual property. Really, really inherently difficult to police these things, even with things like gardening leave. Dan Fallows will have knowledge of Red Bull and Adrian Newey's way of working and his philosophy and design concept ethos. And clearly he's taken that across to Aston Martin, where you're going to go and police this retrospectively. You kind of can't. That's what gardening leave is there for, right? So as time moves on with Red Bull, that Dan Fallows kind of only has knowledge of antiquated old stuff. Is really, really techie. It's tough to police this sort of stuff. Anyway, the article talks about Singapore last year when Toto Wolff is talking about the cost cap breach, Red Bull's cost cap breach, before anybody else has access to that information. Two questions. how has he gotten that information, and why is he talking about it more pertinently? I think that's the important one, that Toto Wolff has almost snitched on himself by talking about it. So that's happened, and that's discussed in the article. Rabico, what information can she give him anyways? Go on, I'm going to get to it, Rabico. So furthermore now, and this is the piece that kicked off massively, back end of the article, and by the way, it talks about 2 team principles. Back end of the article, here's how it gets very incendiary and undertones of misogyny, etc., etc. Back end of the article, unnamed team principal who has had a long-standing beef with Toto Wolff says something to the effect of, imagine if Lawrence Stroll's wife or Jerry Horner were made head of F2 as an example. That would be unacceptable because it's a blatant, and I paraphrase here, because it's a blatant conflict of interest, because brackets unsaid, because both of those people are related parties. Okay, put a pin in that now, and this is where it gets techie. I shouldn't laugh because it is very, very techie. Let me dissect that statement in and of itself. Now, you can approach this from 2 perspectives. Firstly, and this is what everybody on the internet, all the internet journos, ended up taking it as. Firstly, what we're not going to do here is undermine Susie Wolff and her competence and her legacy and her track record of sporting and racing excellence. Susie Wolff is an absolute trailblazer, a legend. So I think it's unfair to compare her to a Jerry Horner or Lawrence Stroll's wife, because that's it's apples and oranges, right? In the worst type of way. So what comes after, as far as the claims of misogyny and calling into question somebody's or Susie Wolff's competence, I hear it. But I'll be honest, when I read that in the first instance, and the point that was being made was one of conflicts of interest in related parties, I thought, fair point. And again, remember, this is me mistakenly taking the article at face value and just saying, well, I think that's a fair point, right? With Toto Wolff talking preemptively before any one of the other team principals even knew about the information around cost cap. That's with that in mind. I mean, it's happened before, evidently, right? Nobody can, I don't know, you can't really debate that, can you? So I understand the point about related parties and conflict of interest. That's not to say, though, that there has been an exchange. You can't evidence that with this. This is a thought experiment. I'm saying if speculation and conjecture that I shouldn't necessarily indulge in, if Susie Wolff attends, or anyone else, forget Susie Wolff, Shayla Ann Rao, if anybody attends a meeting and is subject to Frederick, so anyone, Stefano Domenicali, if anybody attends a meeting and accesses information that team principals shouldn't be privy to, and then feeds that information to a Toto Wolff or a Frederick Vasseur or a Christian Horner, then that is blatant conflict of interest, and it's related parties and infringement of the professional code of ethics, if you're talking about professions, accountancy, and bloody being a clinician or whatever. That is foul play, right? That shouldn't happen. This article is insinuating that has happened without evidence, apparently. And then you get later on Toby Greer, who's a very reputable journalist, checks his sources and talks to other team principals about this alleged meeting. Toby Greer pins his name, his very reputable name, to the fact that this meeting didn't even happen at the last meeting, or at least the meeting didn't happen like this article alleges. I will back Toby Greer every single day over some online publication. So I'm going with this didn't happen as is alleged by the Bernie Ecclestone originated. This is what I mean to say here. Business F1 or F1 Business, whatever it's called, is a publication, the place where this article originated. Bernie Ecclestone has ties to it. And who is more corrupt and dodgy than our mate Bernie? So I don't know, maybe I have to take an L for this one, looking, not understanding the source and taking this at face value. I'll take an L. I'll do a dead wrong for this. But I don't know. There's so many different ways that you can bloody take it. It's bonkers. Okay, so that happens. We do the shakedown, and I'm talking about it as if it's like fact, and that's not. You can't take every publication at face value because some of them will lie, and do you know what I mean? This is 2023. Internet journalism is a real thing, and the need to get the click is above all sorts of integrity. People will prioritize it and tell lies. Now, is this a lie? I don't know. Then this happens. The FIA say they're going to investigate it, that they've been made aware of media speculation centered on the allegation of information of a confidential nature being passed to an F1 team principal from a member of FOM personnel. The FIA compliance department is looking into the matter. An FIA statement. This is chaos already now. Because what the FIA are doing is doing what I did on the shakedown and giving credence to an article that kind of has no foundation. There are no sources named. Where's your evidence? What the FIA really wanted to do, in my humble opinion, just go away and bloody investigate it in the background. They've done exactly what they did for the cost cap. Don't announce this preemptively. Go away and investigate it first and then come to us with your findings, because otherwise it's a non-entity, as it ultimately was. Like, don't do that. That's nonsense. Susie Wolff publishes a statement that's very, very serious, and it almost felt like she was threatening legal procedures, and quite rightfully so, right? If she feels like the tone of the article is unsubstantiated, well, then that's slander, right? Defamation. If that didn't happen, if that meeting, as Toby Greer says, wasn't anything to talk about, if there was no foul play or no indication that Toto Wolff has information or had information at that meeting like he did that the other team principals didn't have, then like, what are you on about? Like, you can't publish that article. Of course, Susie Wolff should get her legal fangs out, and she did in a very forthright statement that she released on Instagram, saying something to the effect of, "I'm not surprised," said Susie Wolff, "that in F1 people are trying to slander my name and talk in terms that are very defamatory and intimidatory with undertones of misogyny." Yeah, chaos. Strong from Susie Wolff, and fair play to her, man. Listen, I will say this. F1 for the longest time, we all know this. I come in here each and every single time I want to talk about racing, but the umbrella, the context, the broader context of F1, of course, is tinged in all of the isms, not least misogyny and sexism and racism. We've all seen it. Lewis Hamilton has been fighting against this. Now, do I enjoy talking about this stuff? I absolutely do not, because I feel like I'm impacted by these isms on a daily basis. I come in here and I want to talk to you guys about F1 and Lewis's incredible overtake and Max's move at Suzuka, and do you know what I mean? That's what I want. What I'm concerned with is whether Mercedes can build a car for next year that's capable of challenging Max Verstappen in that Red Bull. That's where my enthusiasm comes. You can hear me. Even my tone has increased as I talk. That's where I get excited. I don't want to come in here and talk about misogyny. But sadly, such is the fabric of F1 now and has always been. We kind of need to address it, man. That's what's been going on, eh? That's what's been going on in the world of F1 in the week that was. So Susie Wolff then, to summarise, issues this statement saying, "I'm not surprised about this statement. It's inflammatory, defamatory in nature, intimidatory, and undertones of misogyny." Fair play, Susie. Not to be messed about with, man. Susie Wolff, if you ever listen to her in her interviews, listen, nothing to be messed about with. Fair play to her, man. Like misogyny and racism and all these things. It's 2023. It's long that F1 is still carries these burdens, particularly when you consider the audience. Lewis Hamilton has brought a humongous fan base to F1 in 2023, plus the Drive to Survive generation of all colours, of all sexes, and it's a bit long to be talking like this, isn't it? To be honest. And then you get all of the F1. So this is where it gets really techie. All of the teams release a statement, the same bloody statement, saying they've made no official complaints to the FIA around the managing director of the F1 Academy. They look forward to representing via their liveries or having a team. In fact, I don't want to get it wrong. So techie is this. They're looking forward to representing next year in the F1 Academy via their livery. So each and every single one of these teams are going to have a car in there with their liveries showing support, co-signing the F1 Academy. And that's a good thing. What's not good, however, is the fact that each and every single one of these teams, their statements read verbatim exactly the same. And what that smacks of to me is a war, an ongoing war, a war that's been ongoing for the longest time between F1 and the FIA, isn't it? The beef between unnamed team principal and Susie Wolff, what it's now become is a beef between the FIA and the commercial rights holder. There is a split, a chasm running between these factions. They can't get it right. Mohammed bin Salman keeps dropping the ball. Not good enough. This is the governing body. They need to sort out they need to police the sport. Focus on what's important here. Police the sport properly and fairly and consistently. Your compliance department doesn't need to announce that they're going to make an inquiry into anything. What are you doing? Why are you so concerned with the court of public opinion? Be more concerned, FIA, with governance, because that's what's important here. That's your remit. That's your scope. Why Mohammed bin Salman is coming out and talking about the valuation of F1, that's not your remit, sir. That's the remit of the commercial rights holder. Stop trying to curry favour in the court of public opinion, because it's old and it's tired and it's distracting even from your core mission statement, your objective, which is ultimately to safeguard all of the participants in the sport, governance and competitive landscape. What are we doing here, FIA? Again, do not want to come on here and start talking about the FIA. I want to talk about racing, but yet again, it's incompetence and it's tone deaf from the FIA, and that's borne out by the bloody 10 statements that we got from the 10 teams on the grid, all of which were verbatim twins of each other. They've aligned against the FIA now. But here's where it gets ultra techie, because all of this has happened in the week when there's going to be the FIA Awards. So I'm watching this and I'm like, there's going to be some sort of ramification here, isn't there? There has to be. There is going to be some sort of ramification. Before which, by the way, after all those team statements, the FIA compliance team released another statement and saying basically the investigation is a non-entity. So then why did you issue that statement in the bloody first? But why don't you go away and stop putting the cart before the horse, man? Common sense play here. Why don't you go and do your investigation, like your little compliance department, and then bring to us, posit your findings after the event, surely. And why am I being daft? Frank, it is a waste of time, isn't it? But this is what's going on in the funky world of F1. And of course, there was always going to be an adjunct. There was going to be a follow-up to this. And this is what concerns me ultimately with my competitive cap on. Here's what happened. This had to absolutely happen in the week where there were the FIA Awards. The FIA Awards happens, and then we get the statement before the FIA Awards saying that MBS he'd injured himself and been concussed, yet and still he manages to turn up to the award, which is feasible. I don't really have a problem with that necessarily. But then at the awards, so George Russell isn't there because he's sick. At the awards, normally it's just the winner that has to attend, right? So in this instance, it would be no other than three-time champion Max Verstappen, but they changed the rules. They're saying that the top 3 have to turn up. So Checo Perez is there and wife, and Lewis Hamilton is also there. You will have seen the clips of the speech, both at the awards and pre. And pre is what I want to talk about, because Lewis Hamilton says something to the effect of, the FIA, listen, it's 2023, I'm paraphrasing here massively, but what the FIA want to do is be better. He said basically what I've just said, that it's sad that the FIA is still making mistakes, and misogyny and whatever takes aim at the FIA. And this, peddlers, is where I'm going to get really upset. You're not at Lewis Hamilton, because what Lewis Hamilton has said in defending Susie Wolff is absolutely noble. That's the correct thing to do as a human being, as a humanitarian. Absolutely, Lewis Hamilton is 100% worthy of praise. But listen, you guys know me, Nasser, Johan. I'm a racer. All that I'm thinking about is next year. Yeah, let me talk to you about a couple of different examples. When you're talking about, listen, here's what can happen to you if you're going to talk about social justice. You guys will be aware of one Tommy Smith and one John Carlos back in the day. I want to say it was at the Munich Olympics. Yeah, they stood on the podium and made a protest. Did the old black power symbol. Their careers were they never raced again. They were athletes, 100 and 200 meter runners. They made a gesture at a time when civil rights in America was kicking off big time, when their people back home needed it most. Super brave. Even the Australian guy on the third step of the podium wore a cheeky badge talking about that alluded to civil rights and being a humanitarian. It was an incredible it was incredible. Probably one of the most powerful, peaceful protests that I've ever seen, right? But they paid a price for this as athletes. Here's what happened afterwards. John Carlos and Tommy Smith were the best, gold and silver, gold and bronze. They were the 2 best athletes in the world at the time. They never raced again because the powers that be took offense to their protest. There is a game to be played here, peddlers, as far as the authorities, the people that are holding the purse strings on the sport that you compete in. I say all that to say that I think Lewis, sadly, is going to pay a price for this. It saddens me. Here's what I will say. It saddens me that Lewis is the only one that talked very openly about the Susie Wolff saga as far as drivers. I haven't even heard any team principals. So Christian Horner obviously came out on Sky Sports and spoke very directly and refuted all claims that he'd lodged an official protest with the FIA. Pertinent word there being official, I think. All the other, no one else has talked about it. Only Lewis Hamilton is sat up there talking about this openly and overtly. And again, let me say this for the avoidance of doubt. That absolutely is to be commended, peddlers. Is to be commended. That's the right thing to do. But let's put our racing cap on for a second. The FIA, the stewards haven't been shy at penalising Lewis Hamilton hitherto. So what do we think is going to happen going forward? Do you think they're going to give any quarter to Lewis Hamilton? If there is a whiff of a Lewis Hamilton infringement, they're just going to throw the book at him going forward. And listen, as a racer and a fan of racing going forward, and a dude that wants to see Red Bull challenged and see Ferrari in the mix, that concerns me. And that saddens me, to be fair. I'm going to be honest with you. As a dude that desperately wants to see Lewis hoist the 8th Drivers' Championship, a record-breaking 8th, by the way, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, it concerns me massively. I feel like, and I said it on the community tab post, I feel like in being so brave and open and being the only one, the black sheep on the grid, no pun intended, Lewis Hamilton has put a target on his back. The stewards, the likes of Derek Warwick, by virtue of Mohammed bin Sulayem, aren't going to give him any grace next year. You could argue, peddlers, that they've never given Lewis Hamilton any grace for whatever reason. For whatever reason, maybe because of things like this, because he's been so outspoken against the FIA. There is a way to curry favour. Now, I'll talk about this with MBS. But if you are a driver and you're racing in a championship where fine margins matter, where every 10th is important, as always, listen, F1 is a story told in tenths, where split seconds can be the difference between an epic victory or a tragic failure, a near miss. mention no names, Abu Dhabi 21, right? So surely then, if you're racing cap on, if you're racing smart, team principal and or driver, then the institution, incompetence or otherwise, that you do not want to pee off is the FIA. So whilst I'm split, then peddlers, there is a dichotomy running through me with this. On one side of me, I'm super proud of Lewis Hamilton for being the only one to talk up, to defend Susie Wolff's honour per se. I'm proud of him for that. I am, absolutely. But on the other hand, I'm really, really disappointed because I know that there is going to be a drip feed effect, a downside effect, whenever FIA are looking at a Lewis Hamilton incident, a brake test on Lewis Hamilton, a dive bomb down the inside by Lewis Hamilton. They're not going to view these things favourably, as if they ever did in the past. It's going to be worse now. Absolutely, it's going to be worse. Mark this down the calendar, peddlers, because there's going to be a time next season when there will be an incident with Lewis Hamilton. This is meant to be a clean sport. There's meant to be no content, but as always with F1, there will be a cheeky love kisses. Lewis dive bombs up the inside because he's got to make a strategy work, because he's on sauce, as did happen last season, as an example. Touches will always happen, and the FIA will always be an active participant. They will always have an influence on the outcome of races. Such is the nature of racing in the upper echelons of motorsport. Just happens, right? But I just don't want Lewis to get a bad rap, or any one of the other drivers. I don't want them to get a bad rap, and I feel like the other drivers are aware of it. I didn't hear like George is not. I know George is sick at the moment, so probably not a good example. But I didn't hear any one of the other drivers talking about this, because they know they're looking to race smart. They know they need to curry favour with the arbiter, the governing body, the guys and girls who are going to determine whether to give Charles Leclerc a 5-second grid penalty for, I don't know, an overly aggressive manoeuvre. The one set of people that you don't want to pee off is the FIA. And what did Lewis Hamilton do this week just gone, if not that? Therein lies my conclusion, peddlers, and it concerns me. It concerns me, as if Lewis Hamilton could ever get a break before at the hands of the FIA. Well, he's definitely not going to get one now. As proud as I am of Lewis Hamilton for talking his truth, as he always does, I am concerned for the ramifications. The FIA have never ever given this dude a break, and I think, sadly, peddlers, it's only going to get worse. Rabbicode, NASA, let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. Johan, it's too easy to blame Eccleston and Horner if RBR would attack Toto and do it in a smart way. There are people who use the subject to attack Toto, but this comes from Andretti. Yeah, you know what I've heard? There has been many a rumour saying that potentially this whole thing could have come from Andretti. Do you want to indulge in the speculation? I feel like I've already done enough of that, Johan, on this live chat. It's a complicated one to pass, right? Like it's difficult. How do you know? There's so much speculation wrapped up in this, and I just feel really, really sad that the only concrete outcome to come out of this will be to the detriment of Lewis Hamilton's chances of winning the 8th next season, because the FIA are going to smash him. Mark my words, there will be at some point during the 24 race next season when you'll be like, hold on, how have they decided to give that to Lewis Hamilton? Why has Lewis got a penalty there? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't match with the incident that we just saw on track, nor does it match with the sporting code of conduct and the rules as we know them to be laid out. And this will be the reason, peddlers. Luke, and sad state of affairs that we're road loose will be penalised for doing. So Luke, this is the thing, bro. You got to understand the state of play, right? As a sports star, as an athlete, you got to understand what you're working with. No? I mean, that's not to say it should be like this, but it is like this, Luke, isn't it? It is. And it has always been like this. The FIA are an incompetent organisation, and the inconsistency runs throughout everything they do and favour, and it's always been like that. So what you don't want to do is cheese them off, right? If, of course, you harbour aspirations to win a record-breaking 8th World Drivers' Championship. That's where we are, peddlers. I don't know. It's so techie. But then again, you know what? I listen, in my research for a couple of videos just gone, the quotes that stood out to me from Lewis and Toto were always around them prioritising the how they win more than winning itself. This is a Lewis quote. Multiple occasions, you could go and check it out. More concerned with the way in which they win than the actual winning itself. And fair play. But when you're dealing with other teams and drivers on the grid who are prioritising victory, as I would, you're almost you're handicapping yourself, aren't you? You're almost playing with one hand tied behind your back, because F1, like any other high-level sport, is a zero-sum game. You don't play F1. Do you, Rabico? Let Mercedes get the right car and we can worry about the rest later. Rabico, can we though? This is what I'm saying to you. I agree with you in priority order, but you can't afford to. 2021 is still fresh in the memory, man. There's been too many championships that have been won over a coin toss, basically. Do you know what I mean? C89 and 90, 94, Damon and Michael Schumacher. These championships can get very close, so every decision matters. So why then? It's techie, isn't it? I don't want to condemn Lewis, man. Proud of the dude for talking his truth and speaking up for his team principal's wife and his friend, more pertinently. But you know what? That comes with downside ramifications. We'll see it next year. We'll see. I don't want to do the I told you so thing, but you will see. There'll be a time at some point over the next 24 races, and you'll be like, hold on. The FIA have an axe to grind, and it shouldn't be like that. I agree with you, guys. It should be about building the best car and driving, putting in the best drive over that weekend. But listen, F1 has always been laced with politics and skullduggery and, I don't know, behind closed door deals and all that good stuff, man. Rabico says, I don't trust Horner. Well, one thing about Horner is listen, let me say this about Christian. You guys have heard me talk about Christian. Christian Horner is the type of guy to do what's best for his team and his drivers. That's it. That's simple. I spoke to somebody that works on the grid once, and they said that Red Bull race hard. Red Bull race really, really hard. And you're going to have to beat them. You're surely then, rule of first principle, going to have to race equally as hard, if not harder. Now you can question that approach, but listen, it's up to your priorities, right? The way that you manage yourself and your rules of engagement in any sport, not just F1, are dictated to what you want from that. But do you really want to win? Dana White, yeah. So you really want to be a fighter? What are you going to do to become that? You want to be an 8-time champion? What are we doing to achieve that? Maybe you don't want to be an 8-time champion that much, right? If you're talking about rules of engagement and the how being more important than the what, and that's fair. You know what? You just need to understand that, right? It's techie. Yeah, not true. Horner defended Susie. No, so I saw the Sky F1 interview, Johan. And Horner's official statements were true and fair. You are right. That much I will say about that. Madeline, it's sad that certain figures keep bringing stuff like sexism, misogynism, racism into F1. And that's definitely not the case. It's all manipulation coming from Mercedes. Go on then, Madeline. I'm going to respectfully disagree here, because I think, look, if we're talking about, this is my original point, right? If we're talking about, let's talk about Singapore specifically. To leverage, and Toto Wolff having knowledge prior knowledge or knowledge over and above what any of the team principal had of the cost cap breach? Am I going to leverage misogyny and sexism at Shayla Anwar if indeed it was leaked by Shayla Anwar? Absolutely not. What concerns me more there as an F1 fan is the breach of its related parties, and it's a conflict of interest, right? That's a breach of confidentiality. If indeed General Secretary of FIA has leaked information to her former boss, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff, that's the honest truth. But if we're talking about, if we're going to start to try and compare, Susie Wolff to like Jerry Horner and Lawrence Stroll's wife is like Raquel Stroll. I mean, bloody nowhere. Initially, I thought it was all in the vein of related parties and conflict of interest and scheme of delegation, and that's a fair cop. But you can make that point without drawing comparisons to Susie Wolff, between Susie Wolff and the wives of two team principals, right? It is disrespectful. And if I were to imagine, here's what I will say, Madeline, to this. If I imagine somebody who was trying to be disrespectful to Susie Wolff, that without being overtly misogynistic, that's the type of comparison you'd make, right? That's what I will say about that. Because in 2023, Madeline, it's techie. We'll never know this ultimately. It's hard to determine intention and it's hard to like nail these things categorically, right, and definitively beyond reasonable doubt in a court of law. But I will say this: misogyny is absolutely a thing in F1 as at December 2023, 100% beyond the shadow, beyond reasonable doubt, 100%. And I think the language of misogyny, it looks different to what you'd expect it to look sometimes. You know what I mean? It's not as overt and can be a bit stealthy at times in December of 2023, but I've talked about that enough. Jerome says, stay tuned for more revelations in this unfolding saga. As Christian Horner finds himself caught out, Max is poised to switch back to Max Taxi mode. The developments by Red Bull Racing are alleged to bloody Nora by Jerome. You're going to get me, that sounds a bit slanderous, mate, without evidence. Conspiracy Theory says NASA, Fernando is behind everything to get back at Lewis. I love it. Oh my gosh, peddlers. Yeah, no, I'm tinged with sadness having to talk about this. But again, listen, we've got to talk about what's in the news, right? And this week, the past 5 days, has been a chaotic one, tinged with all sorts of misogyny, all sorts of allegations, defamatory statements, slanderous, bloody intimidatory. All these words have been used by some very high-ranking personnel within the commercial rights holder and F1 more broadly. And I don't think it's good for the sport. Cam, come on, with all the questions around Red Bull activities, we are going to throw stones at Toto, says Patrick. Patrick, you know what it is, bro? Like I hate doing whataboutism. There's something. Okay, look, I've said it a gazillion times, and I'll say it again for the avoidance of doubt. None of these F1 teams will always push the boundaries, right? Toto absolutely was guilty of something before Sinker. How did he get information? How did he get that cost cap breach information before anybody else had it? That's the one that you want to investigate, FIA. You had evidence of that because Toto Wolff came out and was quite direct and explicit in that. That's the one that you want to investigate, not this one that you don't have evidence of. And as far as the whataboutism and saying, well, Red Bull and cost cap, and I like to treat each instance on its own merits. Because you can't if you're going to get your legislative cap out, you can't. You've got to try somebody for the crime in question, right? Rather than previous misdemeanors, or say, oh well, so the prosecution, you did this on X date, so What we're going to do is try. No, like you got to try each and every single instance on its own merit. You can do the whataboutism, but how deep and dark can that whataboutism rabbit hole go? Where do you want to? Like, where do you stop? I don't think it's useful, and I don't think it's edifying. I think it's a hiding to nothing, Patrick, if I'm honest. Cryptic says, I think the FIA suspected Toto of a conflict of interest, but couldn't definitively. Well, Cryptic, this is the thing, they could definitively prove it. Okay, so here's where it gets. Let's get techie before I go away. Let's get really, really techie. They could prove it in Singapore, yeah, but who leaked it? Someone that the FIA General Secretary would have been the leak. So that then the Mister, I'm coming in a minute, okay? All right. Yeah, he had to get himself on there, didn't he? Cameron Jr. Right, here, let's get techie. The FIA couldn't investigate that thing properly, because they were the leak. the General Secretary, Shayla Ann Rao, that was where that must have been. Well, let me not say, but allegedly, that's how Toto got the information around the cost cap breach. So then, the reason why, in my humble opinion, the reason why the FIA didn't investigate that one properly is because they were the bloody leak. And that's where it gets techie. That's why it's like you can't. Do you know what I mean? You can't beat the game as far as the FIA concerned. You kind of just want to foster rapport with them and curry their favour. Even go on there, Madeline. We're going back and forth. I disagree, Cam. You are overthinking the main point that is Toto, his team boss and his wife works in F1 management. That's an issue. To pretend it's about sexism and discrimination, it's cheap and unfair. Bloody Nora Madeline. Okay, so that is the issue, but then. Oh, Madeline, you're getting me to really litigate for this. Two separate issues, Madeline. Look, misogyny. Is it misogynistic to compare Susie Wolf to two wives of team principals who've never raised a car in anger in their life? Who knows what that person's intentions were? What I do know is this, right? If you understand anything about the language of misogyny and sexism and racism, sometimes if you want to be succinct and institute some form of sleight of hand in instituting or leveraging misogynistic and racist and sexist language, sometimes you can do it in a way that doesn't look as blatant as you think it might or think it should, if that makes sense, Madeline. I understand you saying that potentially there is an issue around related parties and conflicts of interest. I understand that. But if Susie Wolf never talks to Toto Wolff about information that he shouldn't be privy to, and Toto Wolff similarly never talks to Susie Wolf about information that she shouldn't be privy to, then there is no conflict of interest or breach of confidentiality or anything. So it's acting upon this, and you need evidence of that, Madeline. It can't be just, well, those two, there is a conflict of interest between, but if they don't act upon it, then there is no conflict of interest. And I'm talking, this is getting very boring. This is me talking about from a finance compliance background, and it is very techie, but hopefully that answers your question, Henron. The real question is, how did it leak in the first place, and who leaked it to inquire an investigation? So that's a question, Henron, that you got to point in the direction of this business F1 journal or whatever it's called, F1 business publication. They didn't cite names. The closest that we got to a name was an unnamed team principal who's had a tenuous relationship with Toto Wolff historically. Now, your guess is as good as mine. I feel like they were talking about Christian Horner there, but did Christian Horner actually say that? Well, you can't verify it, right, because his name wasn't mentioned in the article. However, I found it quite interesting that Christian Horner very quickly was on Sky Sports F1 refuting this directly. I mean, maybe that's because he picked up that it was quite clear that they were saying it was him as the unnamed team principal. Well, I don't know. It's all speculation, and it's very, it's very like slanderous, man. So it's techie for me to talk about it. So honest and openly by Jerome, in this dramatic finale, Red Bull's F1's intricate tale serves as a cover to suppress Mercedes F1. The involving saga hints at strategic moves beyond the racetrack, promising a grand reveal into bloody Nora by Jerome. It's techie. All I will say is that they're the defense is sexism, Johan says. That means discussion is over. No more talks about conflict of it. Johan, I agree with you, what you've said there, Johan. To say that, okay, look, misogyny and conflicts of interest can exist in the same space. But misogyny is you've got to prove both. You've got to prove both. You've got to put some evidence to both of these things. Now, this article didn't have any evidence, or at least it didn't cite any evidence in the article. It talked about it, but like, if you're not going to name sources and you're not going to double check sources and make sure all these things check and balance, then any publication worth its metal wouldn't publish that article, which makes you think that there is an agenda in there, and potentially there is a campaign to undermine one F1 Academy director, potentially. But that's not to say, Johan, that there still isn't a conflict of interest. Absolutely, related parties is 100% something that they need to talk to. But if Susie attends all her meetings and then goes home and doesn't talk about any of this stuff with Toto Wolff, then you have no breach of confidentiality or conflict of interest. You've got to act upon it. Cryptic, finally, before I run away, guys, you can probably hear my little man in the background getting a bit angsty. Henron, the only team Alpine didn't come out and give a statement to the others. Oh, yeah? Wow. Is that true, Henron? Techie. Let me have a look at that. I need to verify that very quickly. No way. I'm sure that I saw. No, Alpine did make a statement, Henron. Alpine did make a statement. The BWT Alpine F1 statement reads, "We can confirm that we have not made any complaint to the FIA regarding the allegation of information of a confidential nature being passed between an F1 team principal and a team member of FOM staff. We are pleased and proud to support the F1 Academy and its managing director through our commitment to sponsor an entrance in our liveries from next season." Henron. Not true, bro. Not true. And it's techie, man. And this is why I've got to be careful. Like, I'm not a journalist. There is no professional code of ethics around what I do. But I don't want to come in here and start spouting things that are evidently untrue. Other people will do that. There are other content creators and other publications who apparently don't care about truth and holding themselves to account and on integrity grounds and all that other good stuff. But not going to do that here. I'm not going to do it. Go on then, Madeline. Last one. I feel like I've read out about 20 of yours, Madeline. How can you be sure Toto and Susie are not talking about it in private? Well, you can't be sure, Madeline. But until you get proof, like when Toto Wolff comes out and gives you and starts talking about the cost cap breach before anyone on the grid knows about it, then that's your proof, right? And then you investigate that. That's your proof. But you can't, like, do you know what I mean? You've got to have there's got to be a body, Madeline, before you start investigating someone for murder. You can't just say, well, they're related parties, so they will be talking about it. Surely you've got to have evidence, and the evidence was Singapore last year. But what did they do about it? Nothing, because the FIA, the governing body, were the bloody leak. It's also incestuous. It is also so incestuous. Quick, Scott, in American court, an attorney cannot call a wife to testify. No, I've heard this, against the husband or vice versa because of conflict of interest and related parties. I do not see any issue with Susie and Toto sharing their information as being joined as one married. Quick, Scott. So I think it's a little bit different, man. Or I see it a little bit differently. They just can't act on it. Of course, that probably they will be sharing information. So long as Toto keeps it strum and doesn't leak it, then you can't really act on it, can you? There's no one to punish. But the second that he comes out in Singapore and starts talking about somebody, Red Bull are in breach of the cost cap to the tune of 1.4 million because of catering and XYZ, well, that's your proof. Then FIA, that's when you investigate it. But they didn't investigate it because in all probability, the leak of that information came from one of their personnel who ultimately doesn't work for the FIA anymore. Patrick Cam, this whole thing is cheap, clumsy. Yeah, to get a shot at Toto, it worked. The question is what happens next. And Patrick, sadly, bro, this is my concern, because it feels like Lewis Hamilton is the one who stood up at or sat down at the FIA Awards and is left holding the bag. The downside impact absolutely will be felt by Mercedes, and more pertinently, Lewis Hamilton next season. 100%. Human flies, Merkel. The other 9 made a statement supporting Mercedes. Well, no other driver made the team statement is sound, right? Make the team statement, because you can't really, if all the teams make that statement together almost simultaneously with the same wording, then what team are you going to put? You can't. You know what I mean? Which one of those teams is going to fall victim to some FIA dodgers? Not one of them, because they all made the same statement, but one driver, only one driver, Sir Lewis Hamilton, is the one that's made the statement, and that concerns me, because I harbour aspirations to see in my lifetime a driver win 8 world championships. But I digress. It's to support Mercedes. I hear what you guys are saying then. Fair. That's something that's escaped me, human flies. I will need to check it out. But you know what? Before I go and check that out, I'm going to go and be a father and a husband for a couple of minutes. You guys have been legends. Listen, do me a favour. If you're listening on the podcasting platform, leave a 5-star review. That has been my diatribe on the madness that has ensued in the week that was between FIA, Susie Wolff, the FOM, and Lewis Hamilton. Sadly. Have a fantastic week, peddlers, and as always, look, but never stare. Peace.